Hello, everybody. We have a lot of people online. It's showing 82, so I'm really happy about the turnout. It's pretty exciting. It's been a while since we've done this, and in the past we've done Facebook Live events, and I think trying it with Zoom, I think, is going to make it a little easier for you to post questions and things like that. So I've got, I don't know, maybe 45 minutes to an hour's worth of stuff to talk about. Um, but depending on how the questions come in, I expect it may go longer than that. If you do need to drop out, it's going to be just fine. It's not going to hurt anyone's feelings. And this entire event will be available on our YouTube channel. So we're going to record everything and put it on our YouTube channel later. Um, I've got someone in the meeting as well. It's B Knox. And if you do want to ask a question of me, if you direct it to B Knox or to everyone, but if you direct it to B Knox, it will, he's going to kind of be combining those together and sending me the kind of the relevant questions that we should try and address. But since there are so many of us online, I may not be able to get to all the questions. So please just be patient if that's the case. And if we don't get your question answered on the meeting, then we'll feel free to send it to our support@adventurepilot.com email address, and we'll definitely get it addressed there. We get all of those tickets answered and addressed as quickly as we can. Bouncing camera. Hmm. Well, okay. So when I start the demo, the camera's going to turn off anyway, so I'll be sharing my screen. So that should be okay. But I'll try to touch my screen here for a few minutes. Uh, Ryan, send me a message on Teams if you would, just to make sure I can get your messages. So when you're proxying questions over to me, I'll know that it's working properly. Perfect. Let me give you guys just a preface of what we're going to talk about. We had asked for some questions earlier, like a couple weeks ago in one of our newsletters, and we got a bunch of responses. So thank you for doing that. Here are some of them. What can you tell me about the new aviation tablet? We've got a couple of those, so we're going to mention that a little later in the meeting. But this is not a sales meeting. I'm not going to spend much time on that. Question 2, sketching on plates disappear. When I use the sketch function on iFly approach plate, the markings disappear when selecting full screen approach plate mode. And the sketch function is not always available on the full screen approach plate. Is there a way around this? And we're going to talk about that. How do you manage plate overlays was another one. Kind of a generic question, but relevant. Another one, just wondering if there's any way you can make it so we can designate a custom waypoint as an airport for the purpose of not having the terrain warnings when landing at my little farm strip. A very specific question, and one that I am going to cover here. I have a complex flight plan all set up through DFW Class B, then inevitably flight following gives me a whole new plan. How do I quickly abort and load a new plan on the iFly? So we had somebody that was getting a little frustrated trying to build a whole new plan in the middle of a flight. So I'll show you a couple of strategies on that. Many of the questions we got were very flight plan oriented, or, how do you plan a flight, or how do you, execute a flight plan, including looking at plates and putting plan notes on your plates and things like that. So that's what I decided we're going to focus on for this webinar, for this event. We're going to talk about, we're going to focus in on flight planning. And there's a lot of bells and whistles, even I forget about, even though I was helping write these features. Sometimes I forget about them. There's some really neat bells and whistles that we're gonna look at. So let me share my screen. what we're looking at now is iFly EFB running on a Windows box. Trust everyone can see that, okay? If not, start sending messages because I'm going to keep running with the assumption y'all are seeing this just fine. Let's see something. And hold on one second because we are having a technical issue on our local system. Thank you. Okay, problem solved. Uh, okay, so I'm going to start with a scenario that someone brought up about flying across DFW and then with a big plan to avoid Class B. So I've prepared a flight plan for this. Let me load that up. I'm going to load a flight plan. Okay, so I've loaded the plan. This is what it looks like, departing McKinney, climbing up, and then going all the way around the outside of the Class B, so you can get some reasonable altitude, or for whatever reason, don't want to talk to FAA. But in this scenario, we're talking to flight following. I'm gonna go ahead and put this in simulation mode. It'll just help with the demo a little bit, I think. Oops. And I am, if you do guys, if you want to interrupt me with questions, I will be looking for them. Got one question here, news on T routes. But they are already available in the version 13 beta that we're working on right now. So those are coming soon. All right, let me try the start simulation mode again. Now, if you're not familiar with simulation mode, when I do this, it puts this little control here on the screen that lets me pretend like I'm flying the plane. So I can put some forward speed in, put in a climb, and you can turn. And doing this, you can see how the system is going to react in a real flight. Like the ground is now flashing red. This is a terrain alert. It's not squawking at me. It's not being loud or anything because it knows we just took off from an airport. So it's expecting you to be low, but it knows you're climbing. If I were to put in a descent, it would start immediately squawking because it's going to recognize that you're going to be intercepting the ground. Okay, so let's pretend I'm flying this route. I'm in contact with flight following, and they clear me direct to my destination flying over DFW. So direct over DFW. Let's pretend they say 4,000 feet or something like that. So now I need to completely change my plan. I don't necessarily want to just start turning and flying without doing my plan first. But it is kind of a time sensitive thing. You've just been given an instruction, and it's going to save you a lot of time ultimately on this flight. So what some folks would do is just clear the flight plan and build a new one. You can do that. You can go here, you hit the clear button at the top and start entering your whole new flight plan. But we've got some utilities here, and there's several ways to do this and make it quick. What I would do is pull up this flight plan, and if you notice, we have these little direct to indicators on each one of these. So I'm going to go direct to Parker County, my destination. So I just tap that, and this flight plan is completely rebuilt. So it's departing McKinney, going to Parker County, and I can hit close and see this plan now. I've done something wrong. Well, no, I haven't. This is fine. So it's actually from McKinney to our current location, but now I can start my turn. There's one more step here. They cleared me direct over DFW at 4,000 feet. There's a few ways to do that. You can drag the route line over DFW and dock that in that way. If you're bouncing around in a hot summer day, that could be difficult. So another way is to tap it, hit flight planning, and insert waypoint. And that'll do the same thing as dragging the route line over DFW. The tapping gives you an opportunity to, make sure you're touching the right things, whereas the touch and drag, if you're bouncing around a lot, can be a little more difficult. So now I've set that up. I never started my turn, so I better start turning. I need to get rid of this control here. Video panel. No. There we go. This little bar up at the top, by the way, is like a follow the ball instrument. So if this ball is a little left of the triangle, it means I'm left of course, and I just need to keep turning left until the bar is centered underneath the triangle. And now I'm perfectly on course to my target destination. And now I'm starting to get alerts on airspaces, things like that. You can acknowledge these to get rid of them. And I still need to set my altitude. And again, there's several ways to do that. I think the easiest way is just to pull up the flight plan, type set altitude at your first, there's multiple set altitudes here, you'll notice, but this is for each leg of the flight. And if you set it for the first leg, it'll default it for all of the legs. So I'm going to set it to 4,000. And now I've got my target altitude set. And so this flight plan's been modified, and that would be something that's fairly easy to do in flight. I'm going to highlight a couple things that I skimmed over real quickly. One was, did you notice there was a restore button here? Normally this button says clear, but anytime you hit this direct to, it turns into a restore button, and it lets you undo whatever you just did. Yes. Good question. Yeah, we had a question here. Can we make the arrow bigger? And I'll show you that here in a second. Yeah. Are you talking about the cursor that I'm using just to, oh, I see. Let me see. Okay. I think that's an excellent question because I think everyone will benefit from that. Okay, thank you. So now I can have a bigger pointer. Yeah. So yeah, I was pointing out that restore button, and it lets you just one click get your return that flight plan back. Another thing that I kind of skimmed past was, did you notice that when I hit load, when I went and loaded that plan, there was another option that said load alternate plan. You can have a primary and an alternate plan, and this is a very underutilized feature, but I'm going to load a second flight plan. And now you're going to see two things here. This is the primary flight plan, this magenta line that's going around. That's the one I originally created. And this gray one here is kind of an anticipated flight plan. This is the alternate plan, and you can pre-create that, preset everything up. This doesn't necessarily need to be for a scenario like flight following gives you a diversion, because those are going to be, kind of completely random. But if you want to set up a backup flight plan to an alternate IFR airport, for example, because you're expecting the minimums might be too low, so you can go ahead and get all of that set up ahead of time. And then to switch from one plan to another, there's just a button here, alternate plan. So one tap, and now I've highlighted this alternate plan is my new magenta line. And that gray line that I had originally magenta is now the backup plan. So I've just switched those plans. When you do that, all of these controls are now switched over to the alternate plan. So being able to have a primary and a backup plan is a cool feature that a lot of people kind of skim over. Okay, another question we had, how do I create my own custom airport? And the reason you might want to do that is for flight planning, so you can just say fly to this airport, and it's your own airport that's not in any FAA database. Another reason is so you would avoid all the alerting and things like that. Another reason is so you can specify that you're going to land there. And this is something else, like if I pull up this flight plan and go to altitudes, it shows you a cross section of the plan. So you can see very easily your climb and your climb angle. This is based on your aircraft's performance specs, and the same with the descent. And so it's nice to have that as part of your profile here. And you can also see at a glance you do not intend to land at DFW. That is not part of the plan. But if you click the little gear next to DFW, there's a land here option. And by tapping that, I've modified this to make this a landing point. If I go back to altitudes, now you can see I've got a takeoff, a landing, another takeoff, and another landing. You'll even notice that this is a yellow bar instead of magenta. That's just kind of a note that's saying we're a little bit out of your performance specs based on your current altitude or your planned altitude and your intended landing point. So it's having to descend a little faster or something like that. So having a planned landing point makes sense, especially if you're planning a fuel stop, which you can also do. That modifies these values to the right here. Once you plan a fuel stop, it basically resets the fuel counter. It'll still tell you at the bottom your total fuel burn for this flight, but each leg or subsequent legs, waypoints between them, are going to accumulate your fuel burn. And so you can always see how much fuel you're burning between these routes. I'm going to stop our simulation mode. Okay, so let's talk now about creating a custom waypoint. Several ways to do this. If you know about where it's going to be, you can estimate and put it on the map, this custom airport, which is really a custom waypoint that's labeled as an airport. If you're on the field, it makes it a little easier. If you're actually at that location, then it's simply use the current lat long when you create it. But for this demo, I'm just going to tap the screen and I'm going to say add custom waypoint. I'll give it a name, my personal airport. I'm sure you'll have a little more inventive name for your airport. And you can put a description in here as well. And this might be anything you want. This could be obstructions, starts between the two fern trees, or, whatever. Um, so you can have some instructions for it as well. And then this is the lat long of the point that I actually clicked on the map. But you can hit enter lat long and type it in to very high resolution to get the very specific lat long. You could even put the start or the ending points of the runway as your actual waypoints here. And then one important thing here is when you click on type, this is where you will define it as an airport. And just simply defining it as an airport is going to change the system to treat it a little differently. So now let me zoom back out so we can see that airport I just created. My personal airport, this is the label we added. And I can plan a flight to that. I can say plan to my personal airport. It'll show up. It'll treat it as an airport, treat it as a landing spot, and you can say it's also a fuel stop and can have waypoints that go on from there. So that is how you would set up a personal airport. And if you ever tap that on the screen, like such, it'll give you the airport and that description that you put in there on the little quick info pop-up. And I'm pausing here to review my notes. And I'm going to check with Brian to see if there's any new questions come in. Okay, we had a question, does the new version of iFly EFB send flight plans to Garmin yet? And the answer is no, from the perspective from if you're connected via Wi-Fi to a Garmin system, we won't be able to talk to it. There are some Garmin systems that I believe you can send a text flight plan or you can import it into. So we're working on adding interfaces that let us export our flight plans directly into ForeFlight or into Garmin Pilot, or into, if the system supports it, an onboard device as well. If you weren't aware, the system does already integrate with Dynon and Avidyne PFDs directly. So if you have a Wi-Fi connection to one of those devices, we do full flight plan syncing. Okay. There was another question about plate overlays, and we usually this is a common support question we get as well. So I thought it would be a good idea to spend a few minutes and talk about um, plate overlays. Um, so I'm not sure exactly what that specific question meant, which was how do you manage plate overlays? But I understand the concept because it can be a little confusing. There are two ways to view a plate in our system. One is via the airport. So if I were to tap an airport, there's a view plates here. Or I could be on the airport info screen, and you can get to this from numerous ways. And there's a view plates here. And this lets you view all the approaches, departures, stars, etc., associated with that airport. Let me fix that opacity real quick. So a few taps, and then you can look at the approach or the plate. It could be also an airport diagram. Notice when I do that, this plates button appears. If you're flying VFR and have a VFR flight plan and are never dealing with IFR, you won't see a plates button. But as soon as you pull up a plate or view a plate or something like that, then this button will appear, and it gives you a few more options. One of them is simply hide that plate. If you want to get rid of it, you can hide it. You can also go to more plates, and from here, you can pick any other airport or any other plates at your current airport that you're at, or you can hit other airports and it'll search for nearby airports, things like that. Or you can say near me, and these are the nearby airports that have plates. So there's several ways to kind of navigate around and view plates from these different airports. Now, I just pulled up an arrival procedure, a star, and you'll notice there's no map being shown here. We're just showing the plate. And that's because this is not a geo-referenced map. This particular image is really not to scale, and it's not intended to be to scale. So it's a little different than an approach plate, which you can always view, almost always view over a map. Um, but stars, departures, things like that, you cannot view on a map. Another fast way to get back to a plate that you've been looking at is this history button. So this is a running log of all the plates, airport diagrams, airports, things like that that you're looking at. And the things towards the end of the list are the most recent ones. So if I wanted to get back to that first plate that I showed you, I can just hit history and then tap the plate, and then it shows up immediately. So all of this is basically viewing plates. And the other kind of high level method we have of dealing with plates is actually more from an approach perspective or flight plan perspective. So if you're looking at your flight plan and you hit procedures, it'll pull up the procedures related to this plan. So my only option are some departures from McKinney. Let me change my plan. I'll fly to majors. Now when I hit flight plan and procedures, now I have the option to pull up some approaches as well into majors. Tap that. Similar menu to what I saw before. I can just pick one of these and it'll show us that approach, or I can say select from map. And now I'm looking at the actual map view of this approach. And if I want to tap that button, it'll switch to the plate view so I can see this on the plate itself. And then there's a couple of taps here. Then I can cycle between the different approaches. And within an approach, if there are multiple transitions, I can tap to cycle between the transitions that are available. And when I see the approach that I'm intending to load, go back to that one. I hit done, and now I'm adding this approach to my plan. So a lot of you, if you're flying IFR, you're already familiar with this procedure, I think. But so sorry for being a little slow and methodical, I think, for some of you, but I think there's a lot of people that may not have any awareness of how the IFR is working. So I'm going both high and low level on this demo. Okay, we had another question about plate sketching. Check my notes real quick before I jump onto that one. Okay. Brian, I have a question for you. Um, because this was an issue that was actually reported as well by somebody, which is if you're looking at an approach plate, so I'm going to go back to this one, and you do a sketch on this plate. Now, when you're actually looking at a plate, under the plates button, we have, oops, no, it's not there. We moved it to tools, sketch on map, create. And now I could add perhaps a note, a frequency, uh, time, I don't know. I'm an IFR pilot. I don't know what you guys do. But you can add whatever kind of notes you want on here. And the frustration from the customer was when they do that, and then they pull up the plate, it's in full screen mode, the note is gone. And so we've identified this as a bug that we're going to correct. But what I wanted to show you is that you can actually, if you're always using plates in full screen mode like this, under the plates button is a specific plate sketch. So you can always put your sketches on here instead of on the map, and then they will show up. Right, so that map sketch is going to show up on the map no matter what map mode I'm in, if I'm looking at a plate or if I'm looking at a vector mode or anything. And I could even turn it on or off. But that's going to be independent of, let me go back to history and that VOR approach of the notes that I would add here. Sketch, yeah. So I probably should have had two different sketches to make that a little more clear. Either way, I still need to have that map sketch layer enabled for viewing those. But the change that we're making, and this is my question for Brian, is this slated for our 13.0 fix? So if I do have a map sketch that happens to be on a plate, it'll go ahead and show up in the full screen mode as well. I believe we're going to get that implemented. And Brian's confirmed, yes, that will be done. Okay, I have one more kind of a cool deep dive. Oops, Brian said 13.1. So that'll be first quarter before we get that plate sketch cleaned up a little bit. We have a Google search capability that a lot of people don't know about. If you're flying to somewhere and you don't know where the nearest airport is, now this particular feature only works when you're connected to the internet. So your device needs to be online. Let's say I've got a friend that's at SMU. I can type in just any sort of search. It tries to find matches in our database, but if it's none of those, there's a little button that appeared here called Google. And if I hit that, the first response and the distance is going to be the most likely hit from Google for this particular search. So this would actually be the lat long location for SMU University. Following that are all the nearest airports to that location and the distance from that location. So I can see now at a glance, Dallas Love Field is the nearest airport. But if I wanted to actually see this on a map, I can just hit done. And I've actually created a flight plan. Oops, cancel that. To SMU University. You switch back into VFR mode. Yeah, and there's a stadium. This is, Interstate 75 right here on the map, right here. So that's definitely the right location. So that's a really cool feature, and you can do this for all sorts of things. If it's an address, like we have a house we have to drive to on occasion, so I'm just going to say fly direct to Dream River Trail, Hazlitt, which is a city over there north of Fort Worth. There's no good matches here in our database, so I'm going to hit the Google, and there it is. There's the full description of what was returned from Google: Dream River Trail, Fort Worth, Texas, and the distance from our current location. And then under that, we've got, again, the distances. So if I wanted to fly to this address and meet someone, I can see at a glance, Hicks Airfield, that's definitely the one that I want to fly to. I'm familiar with that airport too. It's a great airport. So that is my deep dive. We did not get a lot of questions. At least Brian hasn't fed me many questions, but I'm going to open it up now. And I'm going to even see if I can. If you would like to unmute yourself and ask a question, feel free, and we can make it a little more interactive like that and see how well that works.
Walter, I have a question.
Sounds like the reason
Mike?
I don't have many questions. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is Mike in Denton.
Hey, Mike.
When you, a while back, you did a flight plan modification, and you showed how we could modify a plan. So I have a typical procedure like you did from Denton, say, to Lancaster, which usually goes around the class Bravo underneath, but then they frequently give me direct DFW, direct Lancaster, or direct Lancaster, and then go over DFW. So I did the insert like you suggested, but in my flight plan page, I don't see anything for an alternate route. I mean, I have 4 things on the bottom. It says options, briefing, save, load, and close, but I don't show alternate flight plan like you're showing on your pictures at all. I don't see that at all on the bottom, those 6 boxes you have.
Right. So first thing you would do, these have to be pre-saved plans. So make your plan and save it. You can
I
hit save
did.
as and give it a name of some sort.
Yep.
Then you can load primary and alternate plans. Right. So I can load a primary plan, which
Oh,
was my
okay.
demo one, and then I can load the alternate plan. The
Okay,
first
so
thing
that's
you
how you,
do is when after you create it, save it, and then you can pick which one you want to be the primary and which one you want to be alternate. Yeah. And then as soon as you do that, this alternate plan button appears that you're referring to.
okay, perfect. Thank you.
Good question. Anybody else have a question they want to raise?
This is Eric from Ohio. I've got a question. I'm kind of curious if there's a way for 2 devices running iFly to like automatically sync flight plans, for example. So if I change it on one, it would change on the other.
Great question. Absolutely. There's it does require that both devices be connected to the same Wi-Fi network, but then you pull up the flight plan, you hit more option, share, and then share to local network, and then have this auto share changes check, hit share plan.
Awesome.
That'll push this flight plan across the network to any other iFly device that's on the network, and it'll automatically pop up on that device, and you'll be asked, do you want to receive shared plans? And you hit the accept on the incoming device, and then they will remain in sync. Any changes I make here automatically get pushed over to the other device.
And then I have another question on the NMEA output. Does any of those types provide the flight plan altitude for the waypoints?
That I am aware of, no. Altitude is not part of the NMEA script. And I think there's some sentences or some protocols that do support altitude. So we'd have to dig into that a little bit. But currently, if I'm not mistaken, the answer is no.
Yeah, that's what I was finding when I researched it. I think the only one I found, I think there was a Garmin specific type that had a way to put an altitude for a waypoint.
You
But it
have
would be
a,
nice
I'm just curious,
if
do
there
you
would be
have
a way to get
a
that.
need for that with your auto? Yeah. Okay.
Well, I'm actually
I'm taking notes here.
building my own autopilot.
Oh, yes. Mhm. Okay. For those here, that question was, can you send an altitude to an autopilot? And the answer right now is no. And you guys can ask questions too. Okay, let me pull up chat. Okay, yeah, question from Jason. I have a bomb for ADSB. Can you provide insight on how to interpret the data I see when displaying traffic? Are there options? Yes, and I can demo this too. If I say start simulation mode, show simulation control, or include demo traffic and then show simulation controls. Put some speed in. Now I think our demo graphic should start appearing here. Of course, what you're going to see in real life will be a little different. Let me make sure I have my traffic layer enabled. I don't. Okay, so here's what the traffic looks like. By default, if you see this plus 35, that indicates it's 350 feet higher than my current location. The minus 19 is 190 feet below my current location. If I tap on traffic, it will show you a little more information about it. Call sign, current altitude, distance, course, vertical speed, things like that. So this is just a little thumbnail of data about that traffic that we have from the ADSB system. Couple of caveats here. Oftentimes the GPS that you have on board is a GPS GPS altitude, right? So and what's being broadcast from the traffic is a pressure altitude, and these can be different. These can be different by up to 10% of your AGL. Typically, if you're very close to the ground, those altitudes are pretty close. But if you're at 10,000 feet AGL, the pressure altitude can be significantly different than your GPS altitude. iFly will attempt to compensate by, first of all, if you have an ADSB device that supports pressure altitude, we can use that data. And we'll also look at things like the nearest METAR to get the pressure at the ground so we can do some compensating to try and make those the same. But treat these pluses and minuses as the suggested locations. They're not absolute. Does that answer your question? Hopefully. All right, let me scan through here. Can I see other AC in the area? Other air conditioners? Other aircraft. Yeah, that's what we call traffic. So yeah, that's what we were just demoing. What are your thoughts on ghost traffic that is actually you? Good question. And this seems to something that's kind of been coming up a little more, the issue of ghost traffic. What happens is the FAA is broadcasting from the ground station traffic, and one of those targets is your own aircraft. And so it's your responsibility of either the ADSB device or the app to recognize this is your own aircraft and filter it out. And we have a method of doing that. If you go to menu setup, alerts and warnings, traffic, there is a filter ghost traffic checkbox that by default is enabled, and we recommend always keeping this enabled. And that will do our best attempt at filtering out that ghost traffic. And really the best way to ensure it's filtering correctly is to specify an N number for your aircraft. So when you're defining your aircraft profile, let me slow down a little bit. You do that under menu, setup, aircraft. And then you would, if you're a first time user, you're going to hit create new profile and you're going to enter your new aircraft. And it could be you can do a text search. Oh, I need a tail number first. And start with the N. That tail number that I just entered is going to be sent from the FAA as part of their traffic, usually. And if it matches what you have in your system, that gives us really good confidence that that is a ghost, and we'll filter it out. I'm just proceeding through the procedure of configuring an aircraft here since we started talking about it. So I've defined a tail number, an aircraft type. There's specs that came out of the database, cruise speed, climb rate, things like that. But you can modify any of these. Like I know I could climb better than that, et cetera, et cetera. You can even pick a different airplane icon. Okay, get back to our list of questions here. Does VFR only an airport description page mean even though there are perps for the airport? VFR only in the airport info page. I'm not sure where we would see VFR only, unless maybe you're talking about in the airport remark. Maybe sometimes they have VFR only in the remarks. I would need clarity on that question, sorry. Oops. Yes, the bomb does have an option for pressure altitude. When trying to select a TFR, get info on it, I find it very difficult to grab the outline. Is this in a cluttered area? Okay, that's a good question. Let me show you a tip here. You don't need to click the outline. Just tap somewhere in the middle of the TFR, and that's going to pull up this quick info pop-up. And if airport or weather or something else is selected, just select airspace. And then there's also a class B right here. There's multiple airspaces, so you can next through the airspaces. If there's a lot of overlaying airspaces, just hit next until you get to the one you're trying to find. Was I? Still miss the GUI interface of the defunct iFly EFB beta. You're going to love what's coming next with version 13. The maps are glass smooth, and we've added or they're getting more closer to glass smooth, and we added the terrain shading to vector mode and some other really slick things coming in version 13. 13.1, 13.2, the features that we're going to be releasing next year are going to get us closer and closer to that UI concept that we developed. Yeah. If you deselect relative altitude for traffic, how's it different from what you've already talked about? So the only difference here, instead of showing minus 13 or plus whatever on on these targets, we will show the actual altitude of the aircraft. So it would be 3,500 or something like that. And there won't be a plus and minus, and that'll give you the indication that it's an absolute altitude instead of a relative altitude. Also, by the way, if you zoom in a little more, we have a little more room on the screen, so we'll start putting the tail numbers of the aircraft as well. You just have to zoom in to get to that data. Do you have a moment to show how to set traffic alerts to eliminate 10K and above? Absolutely. So menu, setup, alerts and warnings, traffic alerts, and then there's a vertical clearance visibility. And you can set it to unlimited. This is actually not for alerting, but for what's actually going to show up on the map. So if I set the clearance to nearest, it's only going to show stuff that's plus or minus 2,500 feet. The rest will be removed from the map. We should never eliminate, or we should never set an alert to something that's 10,000 feet above you. The alerts are based on always relative distance, vertical and horizontal. Okay, yes, for some airports when you see it. Okay, I think that's talking about the VFR only. And I think that's just an airport comment, and I'm probably not sure why those comments are there. In-flight plan optimize does this based on, okay, I'm jumbling stuff here, sorry. Will a future version allow the ground speed that triggers the airport diagram to come up to be modified? I'll take a note. Right now, I believe it's 30 or 35 knots that triggers it, but yeah, possible to make that a configurable option. 5G networks. This I'm sure is related to one of the older iFly 740s or 740Bs, and it's just simply the hardware doesn't support that bandwidth. Ways I can get ADS-B on an iPad. Well, there's good questions here. There's a lot of different ADS-B devices out there. There's a few we recommend. We really like the iLevel Astrolink. It's got a nice long battery. It's got a world-class AHARS, so it's very, very high quality attitude system. And it's got, it's a nice little small profile built-in battery. So it's a good unit. Another good one is the Stratus 3. That's a good unit. If you're want to be super cost conscious, there's a product called Stratux. And this comes in various brands like Flightbox and they're, I describe them as you get what you pay for, and you need to be kind of a techie if you want to go with a Stratix route for your ADS-B device. All these devices do the same thing. The Stratix just might fail mid-flight, whereas the others are more aviation grade. So if it's not a mission critical component, it might be a good option. Yeah, and we do have a lot of people that use the Stratix. And it's a cool device, and it's incredible what you can get for the price. In fact, you can buy the parts on Amazon for a Stratix. You can just buy all the components and assemble it yourself. Save a little money. Okay, so I made it through our list of questions. I did promise we were going to show you uh, the new aviation tablet. So Juanita, would you mind grabbing that? I'm going to stop my share here and turn the video on. Okay, this is the aviation tablet. Hopefully you can see that. On the back, it comes with a strap so you can hold it in your hand like that. Power button has a camera port on the front and the back. The side ports are sealed. So this is actually a waterproof unit. And that was one of the things we would occasionally be asked about, people with open cockpits and things like that. They wanted something that was waterproof. Well, this one, our 740 line wasn't. This is very, very water resistant. And I think the differentiators between this and an off-the-shelf Android tablet or an off-the-shelf iPad is the sunlight readability. It's much brighter. It's 800 nits compared to 350 or 400 for your typical iPad, and it'll never shut down in the heat. It's designed to be an industrial use tablet, so it's very durable. Like an Android tablet, this does require a subscription. So unlike the 740B, which didn't, it would always work. In order to use our app, you would need to maintain a subscription. However, like an Android tablet, you can put any app on here you want. It's another way it's different than the 740. This you can put any app in the world, even other competitor aviation apps. And we're fine with that. But we know you're going to continue to use iFly. Somebody asked about battery life. It's about a 5-hour battery if you're running it at full bright. You can get a little more time if you dim it or push the button to turn the screen off. Actually, you get a lot more time. 5 hours. Oh, and autopilot, yes. We have an optional docking station. Would you mind? Actually, I have it right here. Yeah. So we have an optional docking station with the unit that includes cables, one of which is a serial out cable. So this can be plugged into an autopilot and drive NMEA data directly from the device. And this is how it docks. You put the bottom in first, you lift this up, and then it snaps into place, and it holds it very securely. It's not designed necessarily to be flush mounted in a panel. This dock rather has connections on the back that you can connect it to like a RAM adapter. So you can attach it to the panel and hold it out from the panel a little bit. And unfortunately, I don't have that in front of me here, but that's how that mount's intended to work. Question was, what's the cost of the combined unit? This is $849. And by this, it's $179 for the dock. So it's a little over $1,000 to buy both of them. Let me check my question queue here. Oh, yeah. RAM adapter. So this is what I was talking about. This can be attached to the back of the panel, to the dock, and then this attaches to the panel. And this is very adjustable. So you can end up, moving this around or turning it however you need to get it in position. We have other people, instead of mounting it on the panel, they have a spar or something like that, or a sidebar that they can connect it to. So we've seen people use it a lot of different ways. Okay. Let me check. Oh. Yeah, we have a lot of questions here. Let me scan through. How's a flight plan transferred to a Dynon HDX? HDX, is that the same? Is HDX the same as a Skyview? If so, it's just a Wi-Fi connection. So you would set up via Wi-Fi, and then that same option that I showed you a minute ago, when you shared the local network, there's another option that says share to Dynon. That same thing with Avidyne. So if you connect a Wi-Fi to Avidyne, then you get that option to push it to Avidyne. Your live stylus. No, it does not include a stylus on a matter screen. Matt, okay. Thoughts on the matter screen? I like matter. Joking. Matt, there are screen overlays that you can get off the shelf to turn this into a matte screen. We did actually consider doing that as part of the unit. There's always a trade-off with a matte screen. You lose a little bit of the brightness. So some people love them because it cuts back on the glare a little bit, but it does make it a little harder to read some of the text and things like that. So there's a trade-off. So we went with the clear screen because you can add a matte. But if we made the thing matte to begin with, there's no overlays that'll turn it back to clear. So it's clear. Yes, your lifetime subscription will work with the new device, assuming you have a slot available. I think you have up to 4 devices you can use. Dynon HDX, Skyview HDX, yeah, correct. Okay. Oh, trade-in program for the tablet. Currently, we do not have a trade-in program for the tablet. We had one for a Black Friday sale. We were taking trades, but that was a very limited time, so not at this time. And this actually worked out well because we had scheduled this to 2:30, and it looks like we got all your questions answered, and it is almost 2:30. I am happy to stay online and keep asking questions. In fact, we just got another one here. So when will we be able to load a Garmin? That question would be better posed to Garmin. We've asked them that question many times. We've had meetings with them. They are so far extremely opposed to letting us into their system in any way. So they're not sharing specs, and it is proprietary. There's no easy way for us to reverse engineer their systems, although we are making efforts to do that. So there's a chance we'll be able to sync devices to Garmin, but probably not with their approval. It's kind of how Garmin operates. Is there integration for Microsoft Flight Sim? Yes and no. We are going to be adding native integration so that we can support the Microsoft Flight Sim. Right now, I think there are some third-party products. I know there's some on Android that some customers have told me about. I haven't played with them yet. That would that you can download that will take the Microsoft Flight Sim feed and spoof the GPS in the Android device, so that any app, including iFly, will think it's flying whatever your route is in Microsoft Flight Sim. I don't know if there's such an app for an iPad, but bottom line is yes, we are going to add support for that. Excellent. Okay. Yep. Request from the audience about multi-platform. What is that? We have our standard subscription, which is $79 a year for VFR, $129 for VFR IFR, supports 2 devices on the same platform. So you could have one Windows one iPad and an iPhone. Those are the same platform, or you could have an Android phone and an Android tablet. Those are the same platform. But if you want to mix and match platforms and add some additional devices, then you can buy the multi-platform option. It's an additional $25 a year, and then that gives you 4 devices, and you can mix and match platforms however you like, including Windows. Another question about WIT motion of Bluetooth device. And correct, yeah, we do not support that, and I don't recognize the brand, so I'm not able to commit on when we will be able to support it or if we will be able to support it. Something we'll have to look into, so I'll take a note. I do want to steer you guys as well to our forum. We have if you go to adventurepilot.community.com, I believe. Let me actually just go there, share my screen again. Adventurepilot.community.forum. This is a cool place to go, especially if you want to see what other people are asking about in terms of feature requests, as well as post your own feature requests or add comments, feedback, upvote others that have already requested features. This is a great way to keep these things organized from the community. And we do have a lot of people online doing this pretty regularly. So. Oh, did I? I didn't actually show that, did I? Question is a deep dive into real plan. Let me instead give you a shallow dive into real plan, because that's a meaty tool in and of itself. So let me share my screen again. Okay, first, let me just say what Real Plan is. It's our automated VFR flight planning tool. So if I'm departing McKinney Airport and I wanted to fly to Sun and Fun, for example, I've done this flight a couple times. Trip. I'm going to tap near an airport here. I missed it entirely. Let me zoom in a little bit. There's Lakeland. Okay. It's a lot to consider with this plan. First of all, it's long. I'm definitely going to have a fuel stop or 2 or 3. There's a lot of airspaces. If I switch to vector mode, it makes it a little easier to see all the airspaces involved in this plan. These gray ones are MOAs. If I tap it, go to the airspace, you can see the details on these. There's also a collection of purple ones here, which are restricted, and yellow, which are alert areas. And then there's these offshore ones, the warning areas. Okay, a lot of airspaces that you need to be aware of, might want to plan around. You don't want to fly over the water typically in a single engine, especially this part of the water. All of that stuff gets handled by real plan. So I just have a point-to-point plan loaded from McKinney to Lakeland. I will say more options, real plan. You can specify the airspaces that you want it to avoid. And it's going to avoid them vertically as well as horizontally, right? So it'll take you over or under them as well. It's not necessarily going to be just two-dimensional around the outside of these. It's a very sophisticated. You can specify your altitudes. So I can certainly go higher than 3,500, say 12.5. Min AGL for a flight like this, I might want to say at least 2,000 AGL the whole time. And I'm going to specify whether you have ADS-B equipment or if you want to avoid water or not. And instead of safest, that's usually moderate. It'll let you get out over the water, but it'll maintain a glide distance to land. If you have moderate selected, I believe that glide distance is a 5-to-1 ratio. So it's a pretty safe glide, which would give you time to pick your beach to land on as well. All right, I'm going to hit run real plan. We'll let it think for a second. Oh, yeah, fuel price. You mean the ones that are, somebody asked about shutting off fuel prices. Yeah, I've had those on pretty much the whole time because I just forget to turn them off. But it's just a checkbox in map layers to turn the fuel prices on and off. All right, so it only took a few seconds and the system created a plan for me. It's taken the northern route. Chances are because the winds are a little better up there. It tells you how many fuel stops it found, how much this trip is going to cost, and there was even an engine reserve calculated into this. And it's basically looking at the price of fuel at your locations and how much fuel you're burning, so it knows how much you're going to be topping off each time. So it's a fairly accurate estimate. Hit done, it'll load that plan, and you can zoom in to see exactly what's going on here. This little red dot is our fuel stop, Clark County. If I turn the fuel price layer back on for a second, then you can see it's not the absolute cheapest, but among the cheapest in the area. And there are other variables in play when it's picking a fuel stop. It looks at, the length of the runways and things like that to make sure it's acceptable for your aircraft. And then you can scan down to see the subsequent fuel stops. Oops. Or you can just pull it up on the flight plan. So we're departing McKinney, we have Clark County, and then Perry Foley, and then Lakeland. And if you want to see all the different waypoints between them, you can click that little button there to open them up and see all the little lat long waypoints that are automatically inserted into this route. Tap altitude, you can see the altitude plan. And notice it's a fairly complicated plan, but there's instruments that we have to keep you at the right altitude. So you can say, put your target altitude instrument on the front and center of your map, and it'll always tell you if you need to climb, descend, or if you're at current altitude, at the right altitude. So we're going 11.5. Also notice it's picking the right altitude based on your type of flight and your direction of flight. So it knows we're VFR, it knows we're flying east, so it put us at 11.5. Then we have to drop down to get under this MOA. Then we have to drop down for a landing. And then we're climbing back up to maximize these tailwinds best we can. You can tell when we're starting to make the turn south and the winds are changing. But that's real plan. ATC preferred routes coming soon. So we have the ability to highlight the preferred approaches that are being selected and the preferred routes as well. So we do not have that feature today. No, we'll save some. Yep. Let's see. Shut off fuel price. Okay. Do you offer personal tutoring for iFly? Um, we have a support line, and we definitely do our best to walk you through specific questions and things like that. But also, we have a lot of YouTube videos. So if you just search iFly EFB YouTube, you're going to find a lot of videos that are 1 or 2 or 3 minutes long that target a specific feature or specific capability in the unit. So that might be helpful as well. But you're asking specifically as a service, like would we sell tutoring? Currently, no, we've never done that. We offer all of our answers for free. And if you call, we've had people call and spend an hour on the phone, just asking question after question, and we don't get frustrated. We do our best to answer all of those questions when you do that. We have had, as an aside, some schools where we've done this, but again, it's just part of the program we've agreed to with the school, not necessarily charging specifically for tutoring. Thoughts on a pay-as-you-go sort of device? So like being able to add more devices than the 4, I guess, is what you're asking there. We do have the ability to remove and add devices, so we limit it for security reasons. But if you're doing beta testing and you need to, swap out 4 or 5 devices over the course of a few days or a month, you can call us and we can do that. We can override the security. But if you're doing it yourself, you can still add and remove. I think it's a device a month or something like that. So, okay. Once again, oh, you should have Zoom classes. Yeah. Well, hopefully, you guys have found this helpful. Let me stop my share so you can see me again. I do appreciate everyone that's got online and asked all these interesting questions. I think we're going to try and do this a little more often than we have in the past. We are going to, like I said earlier, this recording is going to be on our YouTube channel. So if you want to go review notes and see some of the stuff I was demoing again, it'll be there ready for you to do that. And yeah, yeah. Um, and and so the questions are still coming in here. I'm going to take a couple more questions. How about a more relaxed terrain alerts? Okay, understood. That's a feature request that we will notate. A new user Zoom. Again, I think that also sounds like a great idea. I think if post that one on the forum, I'd like to see how other customers are responding to that question. Permit unregistered devices that are linked to share flight plan over Wi-Fi in the aircraft. Interesting idea. Interesting idea. All right. Well, Steve, David, Andrew, Kat, Doug, all you guys, great questions. Had a couple guys come to the office to join us. I appreciate it, guys. Thank you for coming. And I'm gonna give you guys the rest of your Saturdays back. And thanks again for watching. Look for us online, and we'll do this again.